This video is not made for kids. It's designed to be suitable for all audiences, but quite frankly, the FTC scares me. So this video is an adult's perspective on Prodigy and a review from that perspective and for other adults and parents, but not necessarily parents. Hello! Why am I over here? I don't like that. Hello, and welcome back to another Prodigy review, where, yes, we have a new logo, which is somewhat wrong. I did my best. Hollow Chakotay is not a good example, but I have gone ahead and thrown it up on the channel, zoomed it in a bit. Logo design, like all the corners were covered, it wasn't great, but basically, it can't be more wrong than the Voyager logo, right? I won't update the thumbnails until I actually know it's right. I don't think it'll be in this episode, which this screen is wrong. Normally, I record these before the episode's released, and so you kind of know this one isn't out yet. But yeah, we are covering episode 7. Yes, episode 7, First Contact, where we get to answer the most important question, but why is there a Ferengi? Better do it. But anyway, yes, I do have to make some clarifications. In the last episode, there was that scene where the diviner cloned what I called like a Gwen 2. I completely misinterpreted that scene. But in my defense, I misinterpreted that scene because it appears to destroy the Star Trek canon. Notice I said appears because this is not the only update I'm going to give. That scene was actually the diviner making Gwen, and then the bit where they're kind of looking through the glass is kind of like a flash forward within the flashback. That could have been made clearer, I think. But basically, the reason I went, oh, it must be now, is that the diviner is searching for the protostar in that scene, and that scene was 17 years ago, in TNG Season 3, I think it was, and before Voyager even launched. And Chakotay's on this ship as a captain. Now, I think it's important, as always, not to judge a story before it's done. And I'd like to point out that Aaron, I'm pretty sure that's his name, because I realized with his tweet, it actually had 2 A's in it, but I don't know how else you would pronounce that. Aaron, I get the same impression from as I do Mike McMahon, where Aaron is an obvious Trekkie. He knows his stuff. He's done, like, when you kind of ask him about something on Twitter, or he'll go off about something, he's the kind of guy, kind of like how I do it, is he'll have like 5 examples off the top of his head from various series to justify what's happened. As a writer, he seems to know what he's doing. As a Trekkie, knows what he's doing. He understands the importance of what he's doing. I have faith in him. There's also, I'll further link it in this description, but right after I did my last video, an article was released with kind of an interview with Aaron, who is, by the way, the Prodigy head, one of the writers, the producer. I think Prodigy might be produced by 2 people, but he's kind of the guy who seems to be the most active. Basically talking about the show, is a fair warning, it does get kind of spoilery for stuff that doesn't happen yet. Nothing too explicit, but they talk about it. So yeah, just like a fair warning if you're super spoiler conscious, like I am until I had to do stuff like this. But it's a great article that will kind of alleviate some of the concerns people might have with why was a Captain Chakotay in the Delta Quadrant at this time, but also really solidify that, like, yeah, Aaron knows what he's doing. And so, let's just see where his plot goes. I mean, Chakotay's somewhere he shouldn't be in a time where he shouldn't be. It's not too hard to figure out what happened, but yeah. And also, I should formally acknowledge it. I'm doing this weird camera angle with me on the right because my roommate is on that side of the dorm, and putting all of their stuff on camera feels just wrong. So I guess I live over here. It's the left, isn't it? It's the right side of the screen for me. It's the left side of the screen for you. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Why is there First Contact? But why is there a Ferengi? I might actually shoot Aaron about that on Twitter. I'm not gonna shoot Aaron over that. I'm gonna shoot him up about that on Twitter. My words about, now I think it's important, as always, not to judge a story before it's done. They're gonna come to bite me. But I'm gonna talk a little bit about that article, because basically, according to that article I mentioned, we can actually place the protostar, but you can't via the show. So You know what? I'll put it in little chapters. If you want to skip the knowledge of where they are and what direction they're heading, just skip a little chapter down in the time bar. So the protostar is currently kind of skirting the border between the beta and alpha. No, the delta and beta quadrant, and they're heading in the direction of the gamma quadrant / the galactic core. So they're kind of just above the beta quadrant and heading towards the middle is kind of how I read that. Now the Ferengi are kind of skirting the alpha beta quadrant line, so 25% of the galaxy over. More in the alpha, maybe a bit up. It's been a while. They're kind of vaguely around Bajor and Cardassia, though. But notably, the Federation never encountered them. Well, or rather, the Ferengi weren't active in Federation space until the next generation, so 20 years ago? And in order to get to where the protostar probably is, you kind of have to go through Federation space. And it seems unlikely that Ferengi would kind of be active in this area of the galaxy without the Federation having known about them sooner. Sure, the NX encountered them, but that seems to be like an isolated incident. But I did realize a little theory that might work, where I don't actually remember her name. The Ferengi in this episode, well, there's the key word, she. And here's the other thing, she's not a Deep Space Nine Ferengi. She's a old-style, capitalist, unreformed Ferengi. And of course, Lower Decks had one of those reformed Ferengi, the sort of Rom-style, Ishka-style Ferengi. And so I could see a story of, quite a while ago, well, heck, maybe about 20 years, female Ferengi basically somehow commandeering a ship, and a pair of clothes, and escaping Ferengi-gnarly to basically go be a Ferengi. And sort of doing an anti-Voyager of, like, basically, I'm gonna get as far away from Ferengi-gnarly as possible and still try and make profit. So, this is really confusing me, by the way, being on the other side of the screen. Starting, like, down here by Ferengi-gnarly and just going away. And now, several decades later, Voyager was a 70-year journey, so, 20, 30, 40 years later, or maybe not that much, maybe more around 30, they're now around where the protostar is hanging out, between the delta and beta quadrant. But of course, we'll see this Ferengi again, so maybe all that's wrong. But right, moving on the episode as a whole, I thought I was going to start this intro with, wow, that was depressing. I thought it was kind of going to end with basically this civilization in eternal pain, missing their crystal. But no, I like it got, well, sort of the happier ending, but also the kind of the communicator style happy ending. The Enterprise episode were like, yeah, they got their stuff back, but they've also kind of damaged this culture quite a bit. A culture that seemed to be pretty peaceful and trusting, given they just let the aliens into probably the most important room in their entire civilization. It was quite a reference-heavy episode as well. Not in a Lower Decks bay, but in a lot of small things. The little object the Ferengi threw at the end was a Horgon. I noticed there was the little Jacob Pog when he loved the music. His, compliment was, "This is the most horrible music I've ever heard." Of course, the Tellarite custom of insulting someone is a form of politeness. I was even actually going to make the comment where the Ferengi stole the Chimera crystals because the Protostar Shields was down, and then they just beamed the alien crystal back. And I was like, wait, are their shields down? I'm like, actually, yes, because it's cloaked. Of course its shields are down. Which is kind of nice. I mean, I guess it wouldn't be explained because no one would know about it, but it was a nice little, almost trusting the audience bit. I kind of liked as well the cold opening. Is this the first cold opening in Prodigy? Where that article I mentioned talked a lot about kind of slowly introducing Star Trek concepts to the kids who've presumably never encountered it before. Like, the transporters, the replicators, warp, stuff like that. And so that's what they've kind of been staggering, rather than a big explanation dump of, here's the entire list of Federation technology. I really should be using this hand. It's like, okay, this episode we're going to introduce the transporters, and one offline explaining it. This is how transporters work. But yeah, I think I enjoyed this episode. It was a bit weird. I was kind of watching it for, why is there a Ferengi? And please show the uniform, please show the uniform. I think I can work with it. They did show Chakotay's. I nailed the little triangle thing, but I'll have to study that. Might have been a bit of a middling episode for me, though, because I didn't have a lot of super strong feelings to it. It was more like, oh wow, this is like a really nice looking planet, the lighting's good, this is an interesting concept for a species, more kind of stuff like that. In terms of what lessons is this putting on children, it's probably definitely a higher brow, more abstract lesson. Not that kids won't get it, or at least in some way get it, but it's also a little bit of a Star Trek specific one in that there's the like face value of the Prime Directive and learning the importance of the Prime Directive. I mean, this was a very good single episode to introduce that to people who've never encountered Star Trek before. I mean, it's better than a lot of Enterprise episodes that tried to do the same in my Prime Directive video if you want to watch it. I don't like being on this side of the screen. But I think the main thing this would impart on children is kind of a different way of looking at the other cultures, or perhaps even just considering other cultures is kind of like a thing, and maybe that has to be considered. I mean, narratively, imparting Star Trek lessons is important. Like, you kind of need to understand the Prime Directive to understand the Federation. Yeah, it'd be interesting. Oh, man, I wish I could do that. Maybe in the future, if I could manage, that'd be fun. But it'd be great to show Prodigy to, like, the target age group, right? Maybe a few different kids of, like, varying ages, and then kind of interview them in kind of like the reaction sort of Try Guys format of, what did you think about this episode? Oh, man, that's an idea. I need to find a group of kids on my college campus. That's gonna be easy. Not every episode has to impart moral values, of course, but as kind of the point of Prodigy, to introduce kids to Starfleet values and those morals as sort of ultimately like a way of life, then yeah, I always like to look at it from that perspective. What is it I say in that intro? Including parents, but not necessarily parents? I think I'm going to say one more thing before the scene by scene. Going back to the Ferengi, a complaint I've had throughout Prodigy is I wish it'd be kind of a bit more respectful to the placement of species. Like, it's good to get these legacy species in some way. Like, I include the holodeck stuff, just to kind of really make Prodigy feel like it's Star Trek, as opposed to other generic alien show that happens to feature Janeway. But there's also a point where it really can make the galaxy feel smaller, which is a common complaint. Like, if you look at Federation maps, I might be throwing one up now, where, the Federation is tiny. Not just the Federation, the whole Alpha Beta Quadrant area we know of is tiny. Like, the galaxy is incomprehensibly huge. And if you're having a show like Prodigy with Ferengi and kind of a lot of legacy species, then suddenly you make it a lot smaller, like video game maps of Star Trek, which have to be smaller so you can play them, basically. Like, I'm not saying you can have a few. Voyager had the Ferengi that came through, like, that wormhole from the TNG episode. It had Romulans, again, communicating through a wormhole. There was some Borg Alpha Quadrant species. Like, there were some areas that made sense. But ultimately, I wish it'd kind of tone it down, and maybe it will for this Ferengi. I think she's kind of the only example of this left, except that Kazon, which just was a little bit weirdly south of the Delta Quadrant, where they kind of explain it of, like, some passing line, like Jenkum Pogs. It took a while, but it was great. Like, the sleeper ship. He was on a sleeper ship. That's why he's in the Delta Quadrant. That kind of gives me faith that they will eventually explain it, because, of course, if a Tellarite needs a sleeper ship to get to the Delta Quadrant, a Ferengi needs a sleeper ship, or some mystical technology, like a protostar engine, to get to the Delta Quadrant. Oh, and this was a nice little Dal episode, character episode, as well. Getting closer to Gwen. I like that bit at the end where she was like, well, the diviner, and I was the diviner's daughter. And again, kind of that hints of stuff going on where, when you really look at it, like, a lot of messed up stuff is happening. Kind of like Steven Universe was, in a way, where Gwen's line of, I wish I could tell you that it will stop hurting, but I don't know that yet. I'm sure Prodigy will eventually get into those more directly. But yeah, it was all around just kind of a nice episode that I don't have too much specific to say about. So let's get into the scene by scene before this becomes an hour-long video. I really like the touch of the ship is, like, not maintained at all, because it's just a bunch of kids living on it. Like, the mess hall is absolutely filthy. And if one person cites the TNG technical manual that the ship can clean itself, get out. No, but it is a really nice touch. And fine, for those people, this is an NX ship, it's a prototype, like, Do you really need the ship to clean itself? Well, we've finally figured out what happens if you raise just one of the 3 bars instead of all 3 of the 3 bars. You just go on top of the ship, apparently. Has that bothered anyone else? Like, why are there 3 bars when literally every single instance of Star Trek, they move all 3 bars at the same time, and the instances where they only move one of them, all 3 bars move anyway? Why not just... Why not just make it 1 bar? But this is why. We now know. It just sends you to the top of the ship, I guess. Hey, there was another reference, the phage. The Vidian phage. Did Voyager cure that? I can't remember. They did. It wasn't Voyager, it was the think tank. The think tank cured the phage. Man, this is a bad con. I would never fall for that. I mean, you gotta love Ferengi suits. Is there a more fashionable species in the galaxy? It's like I was saying... and I think the last Discovery review I did, Ep07, Season 4, where, like, don't be afraid of costumes, because no species has ever had a look better than the Ferengi. This box thing that she used really struck me as familiar. I couldn't place it. It might be completely new. Maybe it reminds me... Is it Destiny? The game has, like, those ghost things. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But if that's a thing, I'd love it if someone could tell me what it was, Star Trek-wise. Because I couldn't place it. I feel like this is the kind of episode that Janeway would defend the Prime Directive on, let the crew go anyway, and then tell the captain of the Equinox, I've never violated the Prime Directive. This episode of Prodigy was the one where I kind of realized just how much detail they have in the show. I was looking at that a lot throughout the episode, where this planet had so many dunes on it, which are probably more like massive mountain ranges at this scale. I don't know if the camera's picking it up too well. But it's almost like clay with loads of little thumb prints in it, and like the dunes crossing over each other. It's a stunning amount of detail. It looks good. A lot of the stuff on the surface with that lighting was amazing. There's some bits of Prodigy's animation where every now and then I'm still not entirely convinced on. It's very stylized. Like, I think the strings that the crystals were hanging on, there's some bits where I'm like, it's stunning and beautiful, and others where it almost is a bit too simple. It's a weird animation style that I think definitely would, if I'm binging it, it'd be fine by, like, episode 2 or 3. And every now and then, Rock Talk looks a little strange. I don't know, is it just me? But, no, the detail work in the vast majority of scenes is a beautifully animated show, and I get why it takes so long to make. They were writing it, they wrote Odo's cameo in the last episode for Renee to actually take the role back up because he was still alive when they were planning and writing the episodes for Prodigy. That's how long it takes to make this show. Incidentally, he died 2-3 years ago? 2019, I believe. I mean, yeah, look at a scene like that. Hey, I got the pointing down. It's just, it looks beautiful. Beautifully animated. You have no idea how much of a tease the first scene where they showed this clip was, because basically, the bit of the uniform I wasn't sure about. I'm not sure what Aaron was saying when I'd have to adjust the layouts. Like, I'd have to go over and check it. But it had, like, the reverse of TNG with the triangle-y bit, and I couldn't tell if that was actually there or not, and I wasn't sure if there was, like, a gray undershirt like Janeway has. And then this one, not this specific thumbnail, but this image finally showed that, and I'm like, yes! Nailed the uniform! But I like it. Well, we can analyze it now. I like the little triangle-y bit at the top and then the curve at the bottom. I couldn't tell that in my previous images. There's almost a lower deck style. It's more of a seam than like the open-y close bit, you know? I was trying to name it, and the name that came into my mind was the Mariner Cleavage Area. No, we're not going to call it the Mariner Cleavage Area, but it's a little seam that kind of runs down right here. There we go. Super difficult to translate into the uniform for some reason. Like, all of those corners are my inner blocking. It makes it really hard to see the detail. But it's an interesting one, because there's little red kind of at the top. Well, I assume it's red. Little color. Actually, that's not red, is it? Look at Janeway, and then look at Chakotay. Is that blue? I don't know. That's a captain either not wearing red or wearing a much lighter shade of red. I'll have to mess around, experiment with that in Photoshop. Because it's not a lot of color area and a lot of black. Kind of makes sense, I guess, if you look at the Next Generation to Voyager to the first Con-tact. I call them Deep Space Nine, but the first Con-tact uniforms. It is kind of like a shrinking of the color And now between Prodigy and Lower Decks, you kind of gotta bring the color back. But it's quite a nice uniform and a brilliant blend of that general Next Generation Voyager Deep Space Nine style, but also with its unique Prodigy spin. Really like the uniform. The triangle-y top bit that then kind of goes into the other triangle is nice as well, and there is a tiny bit of a gray undershirt right at the top. Actually, it might be the same color as the uniform division. I don't know. I really want a color version of this uniform. Looking at it again, it almost looks like the top section is a darker shade than the bottom section, the black bits. So I wonder if potentially there's a color difference there. You know, doing the scene by scene, I'm realizing this was a lot of a lovelier and better scene than I realized, and even imparting that moral value stuff. Because you got kind of surface level, well, the more surface level stuff is like the culture-y, musical, this is the song of my people sort of thing. Is like everyone's stunned, a beautiful gift. I mean, it's a beautiful scene. It looks great. It's the sort of thing, dang it. It's the sort of thing I'd love to go to when I do international travel. And like, Gwen's, this is the best gift ever. Like, they don't get anything. Well, like, literally, they don't actually receive any object from this. It's entirely immaterial. Just really appreciating that kind of cultural experience thing over material gain. So turn that around, and let's look at the Ferengi, who's the entirely, like, extremely capitalist, greedy. I mean, you know, they're founded to be the worst parts of American capitalism. That's the point of the Ferengi. And they're giving an object that's worthless. It's literally a spit pan. I don't know if we've ever seen a spit pan before, but based off of the word spit pan, you know, it's an ugly, grimy, dirty pan that you spit on. That's like the point of it. Like, not only is it worthless in terms of like, it's just kind of a chunk of metal, it's just kind of disgusting. There's really no way to appreciate it whatsoever. And so you have the dichotomy of like this beautiful cultural experience they'll remember forever. There's just, you know, the Star Trek, no money, you know, non-material, that sort of views, next to capitalism is an ugly spit pan tossed aside. And so yeah, definitely probably a little bit of a higher brow or subconscious kind of moral message kind of episode, but well done, definitely. And of course, this has always been the policy of the Prodigy team as well. Like, yeah, the kids are gonna get it. That interview's really great. I'm just not gonna read it to you, but if you don't mind the potential for some minor spoilery stuff, definitely give that a read. I haven't mentioned it yet, but assuming we can get an explanation for why this ship is where it is wonderful to see the Marauder class again. Not the Marauder class, the Ferengi Marauder. It's got a really weird name that I can never remember. No, I can't get Tadaridax out of my head. It's got a name. Look it up if you care, but it's got a weird name. It's lovely to see. And this is kind of how I think weathering should be done for the ships, especially the big ones, where Prodigy's great on detail. They've done some weathering, but it's not like Discovery where it's like absolutely scratched to hell. It's just some like hints in little pieces. Like, give it a closer look if you really care, but yeah, beautifully animated Ferengi Marauder. And faithful. And I think it's nice we got the proper explanation of why this damaged the culture for the people who are brand new to Star Trek, and especially the younger audiences that may not immediately get that, you know, because it is kind of if you're not used to thinking Prime Directive-wise, like, oh, they returned the stuff, it's fine now. Well, no, because this was like the first contact, their perception of aliens is now damaged. It was nice to have a little scene like that. And with that, we've actually covered the whole scene by scene. There's a little scene where, you know, basically, well, I keep wanting to call her Ishka, this female Ferengi again. But yeah, pretty good. I'm quite hungry. I want to go get some breakfast before editing this. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. And the big old Tom Paris thumbs up. I'll see you next time.